Hello, and welcome to Transformations Café, where we're serving light as bold as love. I'm your host, Ken Marks. Transformations Café is brought to you by the Institute for Global Transformation, or IFGT. We're a nonprofit, all-volunteer organization, and our vision is a world working together to utilize the power, love, and wisdom of higher consciousness to benefit humanity and the planet. Our mission is to support transformations in consciousness and in the way humanity interacts with one another so as to bring about positive change in the world individually and collectively. We invite you to visit our website, theglobaltransformation.org. And if you'd like to join us, there is a join button at the top of every page on the website. And if you'd like to support our work, including programs like this one, there's a donate button also on the top of every page that will take you straight through to PayPal. Transformations Café is being recorded and will be published on IFGT's YouTube channel. And for those of you joining us live for today's program, if you choose to participate, please note that we'll accept this as your implied consent to appear in that publication. We would really appreciate it if everyone seeing this would please subscribe to our channel. It really does help us and helps us access additional features on YouTube. So if you would subscribe, we'd appreciate it, and click that bell icon to be notified when this and other new content is published to our channel. Thanks again to those who have joined us for today's program live. And Transformations Café is a conversation. It's not just another interview program. And if you would like to join the conversation and interact directly with our guest, please just type the letter Q in the chat. Otherwise, if you simply want your question read, then please just type your question in the chat and we'll get to those as many as we can. So on today's program, we're continuing to kind of weave our conversations around the ageless or ancient wisdom and how this shows up in our everyday lives, and especially today in terms of transformation. And transformation is a term that's heard a lot in spirituality and consciousness context, but do we really understand what that means? It's kind of a familiar term, but what does it mean, and how do we know when we've actually transformed, either individually or collectively? So I'm excited today to have Penney Peirce join us to help explore this. And so I'm going to read a brief bio and share a little bit more about Penney, and then we'll get going with our conversation. Penney Peirce is an internationally respected clairvoyant empath, visionary, author, and popular lecturer and trainer. She is one of the early pioneers in the intuition development movement, specializing in expanded perception, personal and societal transformation, inner energy dynamics, and dream work. Penney's work is open-minded, practical, and sophisticated, synthesizing diverse cultural and spiritual worldviews with many years' experience in business as a corporate art director. She has worked in the US, Japan, Europe, South America, and South Africa, coaching business and government leaders, psychologists, scientists, celebrities, and those on a spiritual path about the hidden dynamics of what makes for true success. She is extraordinarily attuned to the intricacies of the mind and the dimensions of human awareness, blending a deep understanding of natural laws with a designer's skill in structural patterning. She's known for her ability to present complex ideas in a common sense, easy to understand way, which will be perfect for this evening. And she's also the author of 10 books, unless we've lost count since I got this bio. So at least 10, including her most recent books, Women Gone Wild, Intuition, The Feminine Guide to Fearless Living, and Frequency, The Power of Personal Vibration, 15th anniversary edition. And congratulations on that, Penney. That's wonderful that that book is doing so well and has just been republished. Penney lives a little ways down the road here in Florida. We'll include her website and other links she's provided for her books and Substack page in the program notes on YouTube. So with that, I'm delighted to say welcome to Transformations Cafe, Penney Peirce.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again, welcome. And so I think the best place to probably start is kind of, at least, how do you define transformation, or what do we mean when we use that word?
Well, I think it's really different than change. And I don't think a lot of people really understand it, honestly, because they think something's transformed, but it's really just changed. It's still in the 3D reality. I
Right.
use the example of if you have a tabletop with a bunch of objects around on it, and you move those objects around, they're just changed. Nothing's really different. But if you take a point, and you take a whole bunch of points and line them up, you get a line. And if you take a whole bunch of lines, you get a plane. And if you take a whole bunch of planes, you get a cube. And these are dimensional shifts.
Right.
And different kinds of consciousness. I mean, a flat land, right? We used to think the world was flat. But now I think we're shifting into another dimension of consciousness, and I think it's spherical. The cube is moving into the spiral and the sphere and so my reality model has changed. Things are not linear anymore. So part of this is understanding that our perception itself is going through a radical shift. And the way that happens is that the frequency on the planet is increasing so much and so continually, and has been for a long time. But now it's really, really high frequency. And when that happens, the old way of thinking in linear terms is just too slow. It's like A, B, C, D, E, beginning, middle, end. And it takes time. And there are gaps between the points where it seems like there's emptiness. Like you have a goal, it's out ahead of you somewhere. You don't have it right now. It's separate from you. And so it actually causes pain and suffering, like I don't have my goal. So I have to use willpower and force to cross that empty space and to get my mind in gear and be clever and make it happen. That's the old way of thinking, using willpower a lot. But the new way is that everything's in the moment with you, and the moment is huge. The past and the future are in the moment. They're being swallowed up by the present moment. And to me, the new model of reality is a spherical one. It's like I have a ball around me. It's our aura, maybe. And that ball is full of my own soul's energy, and that as it expands, it can go way out and include a lot more of the collective consciousness, the unified field, everything. And when it shrinks down, you might be changing a watch battery or something, very physical. And we go in and out kind of like an accordion in a way all day long. Tight focus, open focus, meditation, dream world at night, in and out, accessing all these different kinds of consciousness and different frequencies of consciousness. But when we wake up, I think that we have a bad habit of going back to the familiar linear way of thinking again. This A, B, C, D, and you get E, whatever. And then we kind of solidify and go back into this old consciousness where everything seems so hard and so separate from us and takes so much effort, and we have pain and suffering and all these things. So the perceptual shift I write about in my book Leap of Perception, which comes after frequency, and that is a huge thing. But in order to get to that perceptual shift, and I'm sorry this is taking so long, but it is a kind of complicated process, we have to get rid of the old linear thoughts, those habits of thinking, beliefs, things that are fixated in linear perception. life is this way. I'm this way because I am a blonde person with, whatever, all these things you identify with. And you limit who you are when you hold all those ideas to yourself about the way your country should be, the way life should be, the way you have to act in order to be successful, blah, 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 and so part of this is about recognizing that these things that we used to hold as security are actually in our way now. As the consciousness reaches higher level, we're starting to identify as the soul. We're getting that high enough consciousness that we're going, oh, I understand spiritual reality now. Suddenly I'm merging with it. Before it was separate out there in heaven somewhere, but now we're merging into it, or we're finding it in the physical world. And it's all a function of frequency on the planet. So are you with me so far?
I'm
Okay.
seeing some head nods, and
Okay.
the audience here in general is maybe a bit further along than just 1 foot on the path.
Yeah.
Might be helpful if because the word frequency is also used a lot, and I think that can be confusing. And so part of what we try to do is not ignore what I just said about our audience, but also if we can be of help if someone is unfamiliar with some things, and we can help educate. So when you say frequency, how do you think about that, or would
it's all about vibration. Everything vibrates and like, water, it's ice, it's, water, it's gas, it's even easy water now, as they're talking about, these crystalline water. So I just, everything vibrates at different levels, and our emotions have different frequencies, and our mental states have different frequencies. And we can be in charge of the way we vibrate. That's the key thing. Your home frequency is, I think of it as the soul in the body, the personality operating from the soul's wisdom. And it always feels so good when you center back into your home frequency, because it's just deeply comfortable. There's common sense. There's no struggle. It feels like you, and so everybody's got their own version of that. But it's a good way to modulate your transformation process, because we are oscillating a lot, and we're going into the old way of thinking of linear, where there's separation, which causes pain and suffering, back into the unified state of your home frequency, where the soul is in the body. You don't have a soul, you are a soul. You are the soul right now. And right now, looking out from these eyes. And so what does the soul want to say? What as you as a soul, what do you know? So this is also takes you into that spherical perception I was talking about. But the way you get to that really true realization about I am the soul and I'm here right now 100% is to get rid of all that blockage, fear. And that's the psychological process, that's the spiritual path, and it probably, for most of us who are interested in transformation, we started on this a long time ago, paying attention, wanting life to be better, not wanting to act a certain way, and realizing that we were creating most of our own suffering because of the way we were thinking, and so we started to clean up our act. And the more we cleared fear, the more light comes through. The more higher frequency we allow ourselves to vibrate at, the more soul comes through. And that's, to me, transformation. Is that when you give up being this isolated personality, separated from everything else in the world, and separated even from your own soul, and you start to feel the connectedness of things, because you feel it a resonance, and resonance gives us connectedness, and it's a vibratory insight. So when you can start to feel how you are like something else, that's actually one of the great skills for developing intuition. When you think something's different from you, intuition stops. When you find commonality and similarity, intuition opens up and you get a ton of information. So I'm kind of wandering around here, but yeah, so I mean, transformation is something that is causing us to change our identity from just being a personality separated from the spiritual realm to feeling that the spiritual realm is inside matter. It's inside your body. It's inside your personality. You're it. And then what is that perception going to be like? If I'm the soul, how do I perceive the world? Now I'm starting to understand universal laws and how spirit works in the spiritual realm. There is no fear there. The soul can't be damaged. It's fine all the time. It's just that we have these filters that don't allow the soul to come all the way through. And that creates pain and suffering for us here as personalities.
A phrase I love quoting from someone I'm studying with is the wisdom is the wisdom. And everything that you shared and everything that I've heard you talk about in other interviews and the things that I've read from you are consistent with certainly everything I've learned more formally in studying the wisdom. And this is part of it. And I guess one thing that strikes me is it's something I've run into a lot in terms of maybe how you could start to get some momentum on this, because you were talking about part of our, say, lower ego mind process is to try to exert will and force.
Right.
And that's a part of this, but letting go is also a part of it. And part of that can help maybe lubricate things and free them up is going within to really start to inquire, who am I? And it sounds like the transformation that you're describing starts to help us redefine or come to a different understanding when we ask that question.
Yeah. And maybe it's easier when you think about, why am I suffering? Why am I in pain? And stop blaming it on something in the quote outside world. It's a thought system that we're buying into. It's assumptions we've made about life that aren't actually correct. And so I think part of it is taking responsibility for the way you feel, and that your feelings level comes from your belief level, your thoughts, your perception. And that perception is often based on fear. Let's get along. I'll be like you so I can fit in, and I don't want to alienate anybody. But then I want to be myself. So get out of my way, and then start taking responsibility for seeing how that is messing up your life. And say, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to have bad relationships anymore. I want to find the right job, the right work for myself that I really like. I want to, be happy, basically. What brings joy? And when you choose something like that, the stuff, it's like if you want to be loving, everything that isn't loving in you comes to the surface,
Mm-hmm.
And there you go. And you're on your clearing process. And last year, no, when was that? I've been writing this book on money and transformation. And I really got to this point about understanding the deep levels of what gratitude and generosity actually were, and all the states of being that go into each of those particular states. It was a really powerful meditation I had, where I was taken into these experiences at a really deep level. And I realized that they go together. They are not separate things. one doesn't cause the other. They're actually kind of part of the same thing. But they are also states that allow the soul to come through without distortion. So as I started feeling that, I said, I am sick of having, I was calling it deprivation consciousness. Like, well, my nieces never send me thank you notes for what things I do for them, or whatever. And
Yeah.
And I'm just sick of it. I don't want to think that way anymore. And
And
so
that's also part of your transformation, right?
definitely big time, because I didn't just say, well, I think I'd like to be, less this way, maybe one day. No, I said, I am choosing now to be loving, open-hearted, generous, in gratitude for everything. And 3 days later, I had to go into the emergency room and was put in cardiac ICU because I had acute heart failure. And I'm like, what happened to me? It was kind of like, oh, you asked for it, here you go. Here's your shortcut into being loving. We're going to open your heart, literally.
Yeah.
And but the weird thing was I felt lucky through the whole thing, which I got a great surgeon. I was in ICU for 3 weeks, and all the nurses were like, why are you smiling when we come in the morning? So that started something. And then my other dog died in the fall, which was like another, I said, why do I have to have 2 heart openings? Well, this was an emotional one in 7 months. So then a lot of things about heart started coming up, like all things about people's meanness and things that had wounded my heart, like surfacing. So I wasn't even nearly close to being finished with my clearing process, but I could see it now, and I could realize that I don't have to hold this. I don't, and they're all telling me, the doctors right there, I'll say, well, this will get worse over time, and you need, there's nothing more we can do. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. And so the last thing that I saw was in a meditation. I said, why is my heart, I was told in my journal that you are your heart. You actually are your heart. You use the heart as a doorway, really, to come into this life and to leave this life. It is your doorway in and your doorway out, and it is you. That higher heart is who you are. And so I'm saying, why is my heart weak supposedly, when I don't feel that way? I feel pretty strong and adaptable. And what I got in my meditation was that it had sludge in it. And it was, weighed down from this sludge. And I said, what's the sludge? And it was like all of the historical beliefs of humanity, of pain, suffering, trying to help people who didn't want help, just this constant banging your head against the wall to try to be joyful when nobody wanted you to be joyful, and they would persecute you if you were, or all this stuff that had lifetimes that we all have of trying to get above that. But now is the process of flushing that sludge out of the system, and then, but every time you clear something comes in afterwards, a new insight, a new, like, after I had just come home from the hospital, and I was addicted to watching Below Deck Mediterranean because that's all I could get on the TV at the hospital. And so I was sitting on my sofa watching that, and suddenly I had my life review, like when you die, and this film strip went out, across from toward my left, and all the moments of my life were in that, like in miniature. And I went all the way back to like when I was like 3 years old, and I was talking to my mother about reincarnation. And she had believed in reincarnation, and she was telling me where she thought she had lived. And I go, right, right, you know. But then I saw that everything had happened in this incredible engineering process to be just right and open the path for the next thing to come in and be just right, for the next thing to come in and be just right. And it was awesome. I mean, unbelievably awesome. And I was astounded. And then I thought, and I went into one of those moments years ago when you had to do mailings by hand. You know, you designed it and printed it and Xeroxed it or whatever, and went folded it and put tabs on it and did all your mailing labels, and you know, and I was at my desk doing that and just perfectly happy, because that's the way you did things then. You know. And I was in there, and I was thinking, and I was still in that moment. It was alive in that moment. And then I pulled out, and it went back into its little archive, I guess. And I realized I could go into any moment and it's still there, which was another revelation. And then I looked at the whole thing and I thought, well, I don't care about that much anymore. You know, like, is that my story? Am I my story? Is that what I am? And I was, no, I'm just this opening right now. I'm just this kind of white hole where stuff's coming through. And so part of, I think, transformation is that you give up a lot of your identity, the small identity of everything you've associated yourself with. And you allow yourself to be in the flow, and you kind of have faith that the we, you know, this is another piece. I'm not just a me anymore. I'm part of a big group of beings, a big we, collective consciousness. And we are engineering this whole process. I help you, you help me, everybody helps each other, whoever needs to be in the experience, we somehow get together, spiritually engineered. It's magical and perfect. So everything is evolutionary. And when I got that, I relaxed so much. You know, it's like, what a relief. I don't have to create this and brand myself and do all this business stuff anymore. You know, so every time I let go of something now, I get an insight about higher consciousness. You know, and so the insights are becoming more and more sophisticated and kind of visionary, I suppose. And that will happen to everyone. But we have to have the courage to get started, you know, and a lot of people are too, calcified or identified with their story, with their lineage, with earth life so much.
And fear instead of that, what does transform into love, which you have in some of your writing and have alluded to. I think it's certainly having your heart broken open twice in 7 months was an act of love, even though
it was
it
totally
brought a lot of fear with it. But that fear had to come up and out. I would believe. I
didn't have any fear. I didn't for a minute think that I was going to die, except that I almost died twice, they told me. I was like, oh, but no, I didn't. I didn't understand exactly what was happening to me, because it happened on that March 22nd of last year, which was supposed to be this big portal opening or something, which I didn't know about. But they stalled the surgery until that day. Wow. And I was like, I think I must have accessed something during that time. I didn't have an out-of-body experience, but consciously, I think I expanded a whole bunch. And then it starts dribbling in. Yeah. Dribbling. I thought, oh, maybe I'll be really different after this. No, I was just the same, just the same. So how about you guys? You want to ask questions or?
I've got a couple in the chat. And so I think I'll start with one from Tamna, and then we'll switch gears a little bit. But while we're still in the kind of mode of talking about personal transformation, and I'll read the question, but a lot of us, I think, that either experience this or at least get an inkling and have a curiosity, making, so how do you do it is kind of, and so Tamara's question reads, you mentioned waking up and going back to the linear way of thinking. What practices or self-reminders would you suggest that can be implemented by the individual right in that moment to kind of not go back and forth, but cumulatively upwards?
Yeah, that's really important. First of all, I think we have to not beat ourselves up for backsliding, because we are in a world that is about oscillation. We always rock. And when you get pulled down into the tight end and contracted side, and you realize maybe there's something I'm supposed to actually focus on in this side of the process, and it's not bad, and you get the insight, then you open up and you go into the good stuff, the rewards, and then that integrates, and then the next level of what you were trying to clear yourself of will come up. The more loving you become, the more the bottom of the bucket stuff comes up. At first it's just the little stuff, then it gets deeper and deeper and deeper until it takes the same amount of energy to just not engage with it, whether it's a small thing when you're in the beginning stage or a big thing when you've done your work and you're a pretty loving person. Then you can look at those big heavy duty things, and it's no different than getting rid of the first one. So the way of doing it is notice what you notice. Stay conscious of how you're reacting when you contract as a reactionary mode and go, oh, I noticed. Like I had a woman yell at me last week, really bad, mean. And I was like, what? And didn't let me explain myself. And that was hard. I felt like I had knives sticking in me. And it took an hour or two for me to get clenched, I guess. But I said, this is not my stuff. I don't prefer to feel this way. So I just cleared it out and returned back to home frequency. So I think the home frequency helps a lot in that processing of, you backslide a little, or you get one of your layers comes up, and then you go, okay, I'll look at that and I'll see, is that even my information? For instance, maybe that was my mother's or father's or somebody else's that I encountered that I took in, and I don't need to hold it. I have my own ideas, and then you clear it.
Accessing that home frequency. And when you say that, I align with the idea that when I'm meditating and I'm at that place where I'm in a different state, I'm not worrying and wondering, remembering that I forgot to do something, and all that kind of day-to-day human earthly living is set aside, and I'm not asleep or dreaming, but it's just in a different state where insight and intuition is more easily accessed. Is that the home frequency you're referring to?
I would say maybe an advanced level of it, but the first level of it could be, like, for me, it's cheerfulness, or a pink Angora sweater, or, melting butter or something. There are textures and qualities of energy that you can tune to. Now, I asked in one of my courses once a woman what people's home frequency felt like, and she was a dancer, and she goes, it's like this. So that was totally different, because her perception focuses in a different sense. But everyone will have their own, and it's a way in. Focus on those feeling states and you can go right in, and then you can get to those levels where you were getting to.
So I guess maybe to see if I can paraphrase what you said to Tamina's question, it is a matter of practicing developing that awareness first, and that can be done by focusing on the breath or just catching yourself at what might be a trigger of some kind or another, and maybe even for positive and negative. So something that takes you
Right.
into that state of fear or worry or suffering,
Right.
or what makes you feel very good and kind of just this is where I know I'm kind of neutral, and this is where I actually am me.
Or more than neutral, joyful.
Yeah, yeah.
In my book Frequency, I have an exercise where I have people go imagine their worst possible scenario, and if everything goes wrong, and how your body feels, and it's like, awful. Then we put that aside, come back to the center, and then we go the best possible scenario. You're lucky, everything's working, da da da, and how your body starts to respond to that. Great, put that aside. Go back to the worst possible scenario. Get into that one again. Okay, put it aside. Go back to the other one. About the third or fourth time, nobody wants to go back into that worst possible scenario state because it feels awful.
Mm-hmm.
So unnatural. And so you can choose then the feeling states that you've just gotten into in the best possible scenario state. And that's really clearly your home frequency, where things are smooth and easy and things fall in your lap when you need them. And all you do is ask, and you give easily and you receive easily. And you're not so worried about how people see you, those kind of things. But then those little sensory triggers, I think, are important, because when you need a quick recentering,
Yeah.
and this is what's important about it, you need a place to recenter that's tactile. We have to give the body something. It's not just, up in the head. I need to feel like a pink Angora sweater. And that allows me to bring through more of, I guess, my love or whatever it is. So everybody has their own. And if you like it, you love that state, then you can center back into it quickly. And the only reason we don't is that we're getting some weird benefit from feeling bad or from being mad or justification for our whatever. And we don't need that. It's all wasted energy.
Yeah, and I was about to ask if Tamina had her question answered, and she put in the chat, beautifully explained. Thank you. And you reminded me of something else that came to me as I was preparing for this talk with you, is that, at least in my experience, and I think from what you've written about and described too, as well as many, many others, transformation, first of all, it's not linear and it can be kind of messy and you go back and forth. And it also involves a lot of uncertainty, which in the earlier parts of the transformation process, that is something that's pretty uncomfortable. And we tend to, in general, I think most people, when we're faced with uncertainty, we do go to the negative possibilities and reflexively. And it actually came to me in a meditation some time ago that, by definition, if you are truly facing a moment of uncertainty or a point of uncertainty, by definition, that means that all possibilities exist. And part of what we can do in our practice is to recognize when we're imagining only the worst case scenarios, kind of like putting a blinder on one side and you're ignoring the other options, and begin to practice and retrain our minds to at least recognize, oh, there I am again, just focusing on one half of the possibilities. You look at the other half, if you will, of positives, and then that is transformative in and of itself, because you're changing the way that you orient to your thought process and who you are in the face of uncertainty.
Exactly. And there's something I think it's in the Intuitive Way book, but it's like a creation cycle, and it's a triangle with a circle. And you start at the top, which is spirit and being, and you come down to mind and doing. You have a process in there of suddenly getting curious and motivated and getting new ideas, and you're like spring fever, you know, and off you go to go do a new thing. And then you turn it into ideas and a plan and get analytical about it and put it into action, which is the bottom rung on the triangle, going over to having results. So you go be, do, have, right?
Right.
Or you know, it's spirit, mind, and body. If you follow
Which
me.
also maps beautifully to the wisdom, and I'm sure
Yeah, but you get to
one of our participants, Kim, will understand exactly what I'm referring to. So,
okay. So
yeah.
when you get to body and having, you don't want to let go, because now you have security.
Right.
Plus the fact the energy that was in the first loop has been kind of used up in the materialization of the final product. So you feel like you're running on empty.
Mhm.
And so the next step, if you look out ahead, looks like the void, like there's nothing out there. So what do? We turn around and go backwards to more mind, more doing, more willpower. Let's do it again the same way we did it before, repeat it, and then we get to the same place. Oh no, let's go back and do it differently. And we'll get stuck on that do have kind of part on the bottom. So the key is at the end of that cycle where you have something, you stop and you have satisfaction. You review what you just did. Wow, amazing. Look what I just accomplished.
Hmm.
And I enjoyed it, and it feels complete. And now I'm bored.
Hmm.
You let yourself get to the point where you've completed that whole cycle of materialization. And now you're entering into liminal space, which is that threshold point between the physical and the non-physical world. And this is where nobody likes this part, you know, but it's actually the fun part, you know, where all the stuff exists out there.
Hmm.
And as soon as you let things be the way they are, and you let yourself rest, and you take pleasure in what you've done, you're back at being again.
Yeah.
It's instantaneous. And as you let yourself go into the void, it's not empty. And you go, aha, it's full. You know, you have to do this a million times in order to remember that, oh, there's really no emptiness out there. So instead of things going back to the negative, like you were saying, you know, when you stop, you can make a habit of taking inventory of what you've done and seeing how wonderful it was and what you learned, and rest for a moment, pause. And as that happens, then you can be with the openness, the spaciousness, which is really pleasant. Sometimes we really need space so that something new can start to come in from those higher realms. And then you're on your, you know, you're motivated and curious again. So I think part of transformation really is this allowing of that shift from accomplishment and form and ambition into enjoyment or enthusiasm and being, without pushing anything, kind of waiting and trusting and opening the space, and even being kind of an invitation. Anything that wants to come in that's just right, please come.
Well, that to me sounds like what it actually is, in terms of connecting more and more with divine source, if you will.
Mhm.
And that just the love of growth and learning and creation for just the sake of that, without it having to mean anything else, is really, I think, where that
Right.
is leading. Yeah.
And I think we do, as you get more into transformation, you see the successes in your life or the things you've, awards or whatever you've gotten, as not the real thing. It was the process of getting there and enjoying it or
Right.
sharing it with others that is what the soul likes.
Yeah. Many people find their way into this kind of process because they've done very ambitious things and they make the achievement and then they say, now what? Or
Yeah,
the old song, is that all there is, right? So
yeah.
I want to switch gears a little bit if was there something else you wanted to say?
No, I'm fine.
There is a question I want to be true also to our the way this program is and have questions that folks have submitted included. So I'll switch gears after I read a question. Peggy has commented, and by the way, she's also shared that she has some empathy, I guess, with heart disease, as it was something that she also experienced without warning recently. And you look wonderful, Peggy, and I'm delighted to see you again. So sorry you had to go through that. Um, and her question is about frequency and vibration. And so I don't know, Penny, if you're familiar with the person she references. She says, do you think of frequency and vibration in the same way that David Watkins does? I don't know if you're familiar with David Watkins. I'm not.
No, I'm not. How does he think of it?
You want to join us, Peggy, and share a little bit?
Referencing the first book of his that I read, Power versus Force.
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
That guy, yeah.
Uh-huh. And I haven't read that book.
Well, what I liked about it is that he talked about the level from the time of the Renaissance up until now. Most of the world was under the level of 200, and he has a chart that goes up to 1,000, which is where Jesus and Buddha and those people are, and we're somewhere along that. And what enabled us to do what is happening today is when the world consciousness managed to the majority, and he may have presented it differently, but I think it was the majority, finally came over 200, and each of the levels has a term. So whatever 200 is, it might be courage, but then love is up there someplace. And it's very interesting to see people behaving in different ways and being able to relate that to a level of consciousness.
That makes sense to me. I'm not into codifying things quite so much because, we bounce around a lot. But I think there's a certain measurement of it. It's things get easier. Like I feel like more magical somehow. Like the more transformed you become, and I also talk about becoming transparent. That transparency is a state of enlightenment and transformation, and that comes when you let go of all that solid stuff you're holding, or that sludge, like I mentioned before, and clean it out, and you become almost like a diamond light, and then the soul is really coming through. And that's not just you as an individual soul, but it's the big we, or the collective soul, where all this knowledge is there and all this love is there, and it's your best friends, it's your loving people, and they're out of body, some of them are in body, but everybody's working for everybody, and you're part of it, and it's like there's a lot of help, a huge amount of help for whatever you need. You just have to connect, and then I was asking these, like sometimes I work with intergalactic beings a lot, and in my dreams and stuff, and I was asking them, well, can't you help me do something to, get this slow, whatever, weak heart fixed? And they said, yeah, but you first. It's like, yeah, we'll come in and help you, but you know what to do. You need to start it. Don't pretend you don't know. Just get started and go forward. And that forward motion, moving in the state of being that you love to be in, that joyful, creative, whatever it is you love, will draw in the energy like dolphins swimming along the prow of a ship. That's what they said. And everything will come in, and in it, like a year, you'll find your heart is healed. And you didn't try to heal it, because if you try to heal, you think something's wrong with you. And so don't think that way. Think you're fine and really fine. Take your medicine, sure, but proceed. And that proceeding in the state that you choose to be in will do all the work. And that's part of I think the magical part of it. It's like what you need. I mean, suddenly you know it from the inside and you have a revelation, or it just shows up and as an experience that you need to have next. It's kind of like my life review thing, where I saw all the experiences leading to the next experience, and everything was timed perfectly, and for all the people involved. It's like you could not figure that out with your mind alone, how to do that for a lifetime. So I don't know if that helps, but
Oh,
I like
love
the idea that there definitely are people on higher frequencies, and they are finding each other. People on similar frequencies are convening now.
So actually, I want to use that and some other things you said to segue into this other topic, which is collective transformation. And as one of our participants put in the chat earlier, wanted to know about global transformation, and I think we could potentially talk about that, including the transformation of the planet and solar system too. But before we get that far out, I think there's a lot of a lot of things that I hear and read and watch, as well as sense that this type of program has an interest and an audience. There are so many similar now that probably even 5 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to find this much information available, certainly 10. And that seems to align with at least a sense. I don't think there's an empiric measurement of the number of awakened people, but it feels like that is something that is growing. And as we learn the interconnectedness of everything, then there is a collectiveness, if you will, about this transformation too. So your thoughts, Penny, and if you have, I don't know, examples, proof would be delightful.
Proof. Well, I feel that doing your own work and taking yourself into those higher levels allows other people who are doing the same thing to match frequencies. So frequency match with you. And when you frequency match with other people, you start to share a field of common vibration. And what that does then is you start to meet each other actually in the physical world. That energetic commonality starts to materialize as groups. And so I'm finding an awful lot of clients who become friends and who are meeting now on Zoom just to talk, kind of like we're doing tonight. Just what's happened to you last week? What are you experiencing? And we need to talk to each other now, because we have facets of the jewel. And sometimes just even a phrase that somebody will say will do it for me. It's like, click me at 1 degree to the left or right, and I go, oh, wow. And it's so helpful, because I don't need a lot of the beginner information. I don't think any of us do. But when we talk to each other, it helps a lot. And I was talking with Rory Duff, the guy that does all the ley lines a week or so ago, and he said that we're talking about this group thing, and he said, yeah, because the insights and the revelations are coming not just to individuals anymore, but they're actually coming into groups.
Yeah.
The group mind is receiving it. And that also reminds me of something I read in Dolores Cannon's book, what is that? The 3 Waves of Volunteers and the New Earth, where the higher beings, they talk about communicating in thought blocks, and where it's all telepathically downloaded and everything's in there. And it does take time to assimilate and let it come out in, the way we think in these more sequential terms. But we do know it all at once. And that is a new thing too. But I think groups then are like morphological fields, and they get attuned to frequencies that are of that collective consciousness vibe. So there's more knowledge there for us, but it comes through each individual in a slightly different way, and then we have to talk. So I'm really seeing a rapid formation of collectives and friendship groups and communities, which will be coming. I think we're going to find that certain cities, certain places are going to develop communities probably based around, technology or farming or, what different interests that people hold in common that they want to deepen into to understand. And I think those are going to be forming in places that are not the popular places necessarily today, like Boulder or Austin or those kind of places where people want to live. They're going to be odd places where probably there are ley lines and power points, because he was saying that the ley lines, it's like they're conscious. They shift away in a city from places where there's a lot of negative energy. They just move. And I thought that was fascinating.
That's it. Just reminded me of something I was sharing with you earlier when we spoke a few hours earlier in the day, and it just reminded me of what I'm learning about the system of fascia in our bodies, and it's a very dynamic, and it shifts depending on any number of variables that the body encounters or needs to produce.
Yes.
As you were describing this, I had some other questions in mind, but now it kind of brought a new question to mind. Do you think that we are transforming and evolving in such a way that if there is, for lack of a better term, a wave, let's say, of individual transformation and awakening happening, are we moving to where that will become more of a collective process and not just person by person, but it does become, at the outset, if you will, the process just becomes that of a collective transformation, and individual transformations will be part of the evolution that is no longer present at some point? Does that make sense?
Yes. In fact, I think healing will disappear. I don't think we'll need it. It'll be like an old-fashioned thing. A lot of things like that. We'll have instantaneous shifts and things like that. But the forming of these group minds and communities, and I call it the convening, this thing of synthesizing our views and getting a greater understanding, a holistic understanding of the way something works. That's so key and important. And everybody starts to get that common view. Then the people that they're connected with in another group, the groups connect with the groups. And my friend, they're all over the world, like it's not just a local thing. In fact, I hardly know anybody in Florida. They're all everywhere else.
Yeah.
So I think that what will happen is this sort of natural contagion, of a particular vibe that we live in. It'll be like the new normal, as they call it, that we'll just like, oh yeah, that's old. Like we're not doing that anymore. And I don't think we had this talk about AI earlier this morning, and some of it'll be about tech stuff like that, but a lot of it will be the deeper experiential feeling of love and transforming emotion into ultra sensitivity. I don't think we're going to have negative emotions very much anymore. I think we're going to bypass those.
So
It's
what we're
almost about
seeing,
time.
what we're seeing then, the things that can more easily bring us back into kind of a fear state with, there's a lot of stuff happening, quote unquote, in the real world that is pretty bad right now.
Mhm.
There are real wars, there are real
Yes.
droughts and famine and other things that people visit horrors on one another. Do you have a sense that that is part of this
Yes.
evolution and transformative process, maybe the collective sludge being worked out?
Right. Well, I think that we as individuals have this clearing process of getting rid of the subconscious blocks that we've been holding, those old beliefs and things. But so does a nation, so do cultures,
Mhm.
so do races. And it's happening at all levels, and so culturally, individually, it's all related. The more individuals do it, the more groups do it, the more the whole culture starts to shift. And that is happening now because the frequency on the planet, I feel, has gotten so high that a lot of the stuff that used to be stored in the subconscious mind, where we just stuffed it because we didn't want to look at it, can't stay there anymore because that frequency is too low for the planet.
Yeah.
And so it's like popcorn popping, it's like all this stuff that this ugly, like sexual abuse and blah, 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 is all coming up into the present moment, which is, current events and the news and TV and social media and all this negativity swirling around. It's like swimming around in a bunch of flotsam and jetsam and junk, but it's clearing. The purpose of it all is to see the light, to get some air, to move it out, to start to get it dissolved back into the, unified field energy, instead of clumped into these fear beliefs and, these warlike vibrations that we all have to have our own country for our own religion or whatever it is, like it's about sharing, right? And supporting each other. So I do think that there will be some rapid shifts of many people who are sort of interested, sort of on the edge, suddenly into understanding. And then there's going to be a lot of people, and I've dreamed this, a couple dreams about this, that a third of the people on Earth might die because they will not be able to understand that how they could change. It's too dangerous to them. It feels terrifying. So they will leave one way or another, but they'll just reincarnate back onto a planet that's of their frequency. And it will be like life goes on until they learn their process. But meanwhile, there is, I was told, a bifurcation of the planet where we are going to have this event. And in my dream, it was called the void. And to survive the void, you had to become like the void. In other words, transparent. Don't hold anything, because there was going to be something like cosmic event or something where there would be a huge influx of high frequency energy. If you weren't holding an identity, you didn't need to know who you were, and you're blinking in and out anyway through the fields, you wouldn't know, because you would just adapt to the energy. But if you're holding yourself into a tight position, it's like you couldn't go out or come back. You like implode or something, energetically. But it's not all at once. We're in it now, parts of it, we're in the early parts of this whole shift. But it was so clear in this dream I had that I remembered how it would happen. And then I thought, did I ever forget this? Because I've been living all my lives to go through this, like how could I have forgotten it? And I see it now arising, that whole story in, a lot of other teachers. It's coming to the fore. And like Dolores Cannon's book, The New Earth, that she described it pretty well. Ken Carey, back in 1980, described it. That Third Millennium book, have you ever read that? He's an incredible, beautiful language, wonderful description. He called it the nanosecond of non-time that we would experience. So I'm totally hopeful, but I do know that the subconscious mind emptying brings up polarization, right? Fear. And so look at what we're experiencing. People are, but hopefully we're not polarized. We're holding it all. We're not saying I'm against this. It's like, I see it all. And this is what I know from the truth about the way spirit works. So I think we do have to guard ourselves against becoming polarized and oppositional, because then we're stuck.
Well, that is part of that transformation process, and layer after layer, or turn of the spiral and turn of the spiral, encountering those things that you may not even know, and in many cases, speaking from my personal experience, didn't know were even there and being held on to until something knocked them loose and brought them into my conscious awareness from subconscious. And it is not an easy or blissful ride, most of the time, at least in my experience. It may be, and I think it gets there, but it is also something to begin to build your trust in love as being the source. And these are difficult things. I can imagine some people watching this, maybe even some with us today, and heard your kind of prophetic discussion, and it could be scary to hear something like that.
Could be,
but it could also be something that is just allowed and recognized as part of the natural evolution. And you said everything important, but among those that comes to mind is that we are eternal beings. And so even those who may see an end to this particular incarnation, that's not the final end to go into nothingness. It's just to the next.
It's not a nothingness.
Yes. Yeah.
Right,
and these things are important to share and reassure people, because they're still in a way kind of foreign, but we are seeing so many things that are indicators of a shift. I know like the whole idea of near-death experiences that wasn't even collectively or kind of popularly known until Raymond Moody came up with the term in the 1970s. And now look at this, 50 plus years later, and you could spend lifetimes trying to watch every near-death experience video on YouTube. Then you got to go to Gaia and Netflix. I mean, there's tons and tons of this. So point being, I think we are evolving, and there will be some things that will be very significant changes. But quite honestly, if we look back 5 years and think about what we've been through as a planet, as a world, and humanity, I mean, the reality of a global pandemic was mind-boggling and totally confusing for most of us, I think, in the moment. And yet now it's kind of just accepted, right? That
it was a very functional thing for spiritually.
Yeah.
As a clearing.
Very true.
And the other thing about this intensification is that as the frequency goes up, you can make these clearings instantly almost. It's like it doesn't take all the years in therapy and processing in order to just drop something.
Right.
Like
That
I
does
would
come
that
with
karma
practice and evolution. Yes.
is dissolving.
Yeah.
Like things that I used to have big triggers about are just like they're not there. And I was like, what happened to that? You know, like it's just gone.
It's true.
Because
And you
I
can even,
eclipsed it. We've gone beyond the need for karma to remind us about what we need to know, because we're there and we know it. So
Yeah.
don't need it.
yeah.
You know, and if we want to be loving, that's about the whole thing about karma, isn't it? It's like golden rule, kind of, you know. So, but I think that the whole thing about like if you have no more karma, okay, then what? Let's be creative together. Let's make cool stuff that really serves the planet. And global, the planet is raising its frequency. And it is going to change too. That's why we're changing, because bodies are made out of matter, you know, and all matter is raising in frequency. But we are the souls. We're coming in and we're doing it. We're bringing ourselves in.
And as you're talking about kind of oscillating back and forth between our day-to-day realities, if you will, and something that is not that, but on a continuum with it. And I think sometimes, at least for me, I know it's kind of been helpful to find examples of things that are kind of like, oh yeah, and it's not so mind-bendy anymore. So for instance, recently watched a couple of really good historical series, one about Benjamin Franklin and the other about the pursuit of John Wilkes Booth after he assassinated Abraham Lincoln. And you realize that those were times that were not that long ago, but we have evolved tremendously since those times. You know, they talk about the struggles of getting back and forth from the new United States to France in the story of Benjamin Franklin. That was a 3-month ordeal.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and we wouldn't even, if you choose to sail across the Atlantic now between Europe and the US, that's because you wanna. It's called a cruise, right?
Yeah.
It's so, and so the idea that we're suddenly done, and the way humanity and we are in 2024 is just, that's it. I think you can kind of just shake yourself a little bit and realize that of course we're still evolving.
Yeah.
And that evolution could certainly include the types of collective thinking and orientation and ways of interacting that are very different than the way they are now. And the way they are now is certainly very different than things before.
Right.
And so it is part of this natural evolution, and it does seem to be bending towards something more positive. It just is on what we think of linearly in time as moment to moment or day to day. Yeah, there's still some tough things, but I love something I read that you wrote, that you do move in this process of transformation to one of where suffering is not something that you hold to as a necessity. And so I that is something that I think is worth investing in and just kind of absorbing, that this is a progression toward a place of joy and happiness, like you said.
Kindness.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe every one of us gets a pink Angora sweater. I don't know.
I used to think about suffering, and I thought, you know, like, well, if you believe in suffering, you add energy to it and keep it alive. And if you resist suffering and try to save everybody, then you add energy to it and keep it alive. So the best way is not to add energy to it.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean do nothing, but be in the moment and take action as you feel you want to, but not because everything's so bad. It's just that you want to help or serve or give, case by case.
Yeah, that could be another practice, back to Tamina's earlier question, of just think in terms of like, what would love do instead of fear?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a way of kind of reframing that, if you will.
Yes.
Penny, as always, I love these conversations, have thoroughly enjoyed this with you. I don't want to steal yours or anybody else's entire evening, although I'd be delighted to. And I want to thank you again, both for being our guest on this program, but also for joining IFGT. You were our featured member of the month a few newsletters ago, and provided us with an excerpt of your work for that. And I do want to invite people to find your Substack page. Are there any other things that we haven't covered that you would like to make sure to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, there are two new the Frequency, which has been selling since 2009 really well. We're doing the 15th anniversary edition of it, and I've written a whole new chapter, new preface, lots of new material. That'll be out in September, but you can pre-order it. And then there's another book called Women Gone Wild, and it's the Feminine Guide to Fearless Living. And this is the Intuition edition. They had the Wealth edition last year, and then they'll do the Leadership and Diversity. But it's an anthology of women's writings about these things. It's very interesting. So I'm the celebrity author of this thing, but it's a cool idea. And so that'll be out in June. That's coming out. We'll have a launch actually over in Tampa area for Florida, but New York and LA.
Okay,
So
by
those
the
two
time
things,
this is on YouTube, that should be out then. Yeah.
yeah, we'll get it out there. Yeah, so those two things, and then I don't know. I have that book I've written. I've gone through the first edit on it. It's on transformation and money, and so as soon as I get all these things done, I'm going to go back to that and finish it and clear it up really nicely and get it going. So that'll probably be next year.
And then just in general, pennypeirce.com, it would
Yeah.
be a good place.
My name is, but it's spelled weirdly. If you know, it's Penney, like JCPenney, and then Peirce is EI instead of IE.
Yes, which we did have some issues
Yeah,
with
I
in
know.
our promotions, but there it is, and I'm appreciate your patience with
Yeah.
that. And I heard someone else say it's not weird, it's unique and wonderful. There you are. We know who we're talking about when we see Penney Peirce's name. So
Yeah.
we will put this in our program description notes, but there is a blog called Substack for those who might not be familiar with it. You can sign up for it. Penny has a page called Becoming Transparent. I read a couple of your entries, and there was one that you published about doing a self-reading.
Yes.
And you thought this might resonate or be helpful to others. And I'm telling you, within the first 5 words, I was like, totally spoke to me. So really enjoy the readings. And it's lovely that you share so much, and your experience, your thoughts, your intuition, obviously. So we're very appreciative. Love
it's a
the
nice
conversation.
format, actually.
Yeah.
Substack, if you haven't seen it, it's writers a lot. It's a forum for people who like to write, and so I've been putting it's kind of shortish pieces. Some people write really long stuff, but I've been trying to put, and I have poetry and a newsletter. You can have different categories, like a website almost on there.
Mm-hmm.
Really
and I see you also had some publications, including excerpts from Frequency about the 9 stages of transformation,
yes.
which I would encourage everyone to read if you have any further curiosity about this, and even if you don't, because I think it's good to learn more about this. And that was on a channel called Medium, which
that's on Medium, but it's also on Substack.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so they can find
it's in
everything
2
there.
parts. Yeah. It makes sense of the process. Thank you all very much.
We will certainly have this all of this again on YouTube. And thank you again. I'm delighted to have you as a member of the IFGT family community. So I know we'll stay in touch. And
Good.
again,
Any
since
way I can help,
we're,
that'd be
we're
great.
geographically close, you know, we can
Mhm.
make an excuse to get together at some point if we wish to. So thank you again. Thanks everyone for
Yeah.
who joined us live, and we will say goodnight and close Transformations Cafe.